so excited about this episode today. I have a friend of mine named Brian Carico with us, and Brian and I have a similar beginning to our careers, and then our paths completely went in different directions, and we're going to get to that in a second. But Brian is currently the video director for Blake Shelton. Now, prior to working with Blake, he's worked with icons such as Aerosmith, and I just like saying this, Sir Paul McCartney. That's fun to say. He's also worked with Thomas Rhett, another well-known country artist. He is in the Full Sail Hall of Fame. Full Sail is a school that both of us attended. And what I love about Brian's story is it is a great example of pivoting, finding opportunities, and then pivoting to capitalize on those opportunities. So welcome, Brian. I'm so happy that you're taking some time out of your day to talk with us.
Thanks for having me, man. This is great.
Well, so both Brian and I are students of or graduates of a school in Florida called Full Sail University. And Brian graduated in 1997 with a degree in recording arts. And I graduated in 1998 with the same degree, which basically means that we know how to run large consoles and record using microphones and whatnot. And especially back then, it actually meant that we knew how to record onto analog tape. But once both of us graduated, our careers took dramatically different paths. And Brian, I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit about your story. Normally, I don't have guests share their background, but I think this is very interesting. So I'd love for you to share how you first, what got you to go to audio school, and then how you got out and then started making all these different pivots to get into lighting and then video since then.
So man, it was a wild journey getting there. So I guess it really started for me. My oldest brother, who I looked up to, we listened to music all the time. I remember we would make speakers, make our own speaker boxes, and remember one time we made 3 of them, so we could lay down and our head would be on the sides and on top, and we were always just kind of into that kind of stuff. And he's at that point, he was into classic rock, which there's about 9 years difference between us, so I was not listening to the same thing my friends were. I was listening to what he was, which I thought was really cool. And we, and I grew up, in West Virginia, Huntington, West Virginia, not exactly the entertainment mecca of the world by no means. And so I would go to concerts. And I remember the very first concert I went to was Bryan Adams' Reckless Tour. And if you remember the very first concert you went to and roughly the same place you sat, you're probably good to be in the music industry. But I remember exactly the same place I sat. We went to the concert, and I just remember when the house lights went out and the concert went on, there was something there, and I just thought, man, this is amazing, and it's just the coolest thing I ever felt. And as a kid from West Virginia, I thought, well, the only way I'll experience that is go to concerts. I never thought that was a career. I never thought that I could do that as a living. So I continued on, and when I graduated high school there in Huntington, West Virginia, I started into art education. Little side story, I love doing ceramics. I did 5 or 6 years in ceramics. I love throwing clay on a potter's wheel. But I went to school there for a year, had no real ambition what I really wanted to do. I remember my goal was to at least my first year was to get a 2.0 average so I could be on academic probation. So I set my goal at 2.0, and I got exactly that both semesters, 2.0 exactly. And then from there, I went on and actually served a mission for my church. I moved to Oregon for a couple of years. And I was had a day off and was kind of reading through Rolling Stone magazine and saw an ad for Full Sail, and I thought, man, there's actually a school that kind of talks about this. And I remember all that. I was just, well, what the heck? Let's try it. So I called, and that's kind of how I started Full Sail. And I really had just no idea when I went there really what I wanted to do, because I didn't really know there were so many options. So obviously recording arts in a studio, I thought that was going to be my path. I remember when school there one day, there was an event and they said, hey, whoever wants to do audio, go over to this side. And whoever wants to do lighting, just go to this side. And everyone naturally went to the audio side. There was only like 3 of us standing there. So I thought, well, I'll just go to the lighting side because, well, I'll probably have a job because there's not hardly anybody over there. And that was my whole motive off the bat, was like, well, I'll at least I'll be able to work and I'll be somewhere in the playing field of whatever these guys are doing. And when I said a lighting console, I realized color mixing, and I realized all this stuff made sense for my art education classes. And it was, for me, sitting down at a lighting console and understanding lighting, it became so easy to me. Just like these guys that I really don't like who pick up and just play a guitar, because I don't play any instruments whatsoever. But that's another story of probably why I don't. But anyway, I just kind of picked up on it, and it just all kind of started to make sense. So here I am at an audio school, and I'm interested in lighting, and they did have some connections there. So I did make a connection with a company called Very Light, who at the time, if anyone knows a quick background, Very Light was the company who made the first moving lights, was actually on Genesis. So very pioneer into the industry. Mm-hmm. So I finished school there and got a small internship at Very Light, which moved me to Nashville. And from that point, at that point, I was like, okay, well, I just want to tour. I want to be on the road, and I love music, appreciate music, and I just want to help with music. And I love that energy at the beginning of a show when, two favorite words are, go house lights. So I love that every night. I've been at this now for over 20 years. And still those 2 words just send chills up my back. And it's an absolute rush that's never left. So that's kind of how I got there. I started in lighting. I was in lighting for about 15 years. And then from there, I started pivoted over into video, where lighting and video kind of started actually merging together. So then I started down the video path in touring. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of the quick of the story.
It's funny. I remember our very first day when I got to Full Sail. My first class was in, I think, the first week of October, 1997. And they were going around the room, and everyone had to stand up, introduce yourself, where you're from, and what your goal is when you graduate. And of course, I stood up and I said, my goal is to, play guitar. And I remember during the break, a bunch of guys came up to me and they're like, you're at the wrong school. And I was like, not really, because I can play guitar. I wanted to learn how to, do the other stuff to, make it sound good, right. And be able to record and be in control of that process. But, it's funny because, you get an engineering degree. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to suddenly go into a studio and become an engineer. But even with what you do, no matter what it is, video or lighting, that it's all part of the experience of a live show. It's just as important as the drummer in the band. You have the musicians up there, but without the sound and without the lighting, it doesn't really create much of an experience. And of course, as so many people know now, it's very difficult to make income as musicians selling records. That's right. It's a whole different world than it was back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. To where now it really comes down to 3 elements that I see that artists actually make money from. They make money from touring, they make money from their merchandise. And then, of course, they make money when they get, TV placements or, licensing fees and royalties and stuff like that. But record sales don't really turn into large income for the vast majority of artists out there. So, regardless of the role, when you're doing live stuff, whether you're the guitar player, the drummer, the lighting guy, or the front of house mixer, that is such a key element to, the experience that people are coming for.
Yeah. It's interesting how our industry and the live performances has pivoted. I mean, originally touring was advertisement for an album. You're not supposed to make money. I remember someone telling me that's why everyone had these such extravagant rock star parties was, they were trying to spend money because touring was not supposed to make money. All the money is made on the album sales.
Yeah.
And I saw that a little bit, kind of the pivot of that in my career, and watching how, it went from, I think too, a couple of things happened simultaneously, which made it real interesting. Artists, technology grew, technology got us to where we are. Analog is great. Analog has its own sound for sure. I'm glad I don't have to deal with cassette tapes anymore. I'm also glad I don't deal with scratched DVD or CDs in my car anymore. Mm-hmm. It's great. We moved to this streaming method, which everyone's at now, but the technology has really put us in this different spot on the entertainment side and the live entertainment side. The technology is there for us to make these really great moments and to really add on to a live experience and to really encapsulate it. And, I think I remember a time was, it was like when they were live, they sounded just like the album. And I always thought to me, like, why would you want to sound just like the album? I mean, I would just stay home with the album. I want to go live. I want the experience. There's an environment I want to take in. And the first time, I really noticed that was at a Jimmy Buffett concert. And this was before I started school at Full Sail. But I remember I walked into, it was at Buckeye Lake up in Ohio. And the moment from where they took your ticket, you walked into Margaritaville. I mean, the merch booths were set up, palm trees, the volcano was out in the lawn. It was just a whole experience. It was like, okay, we're not here just for the music. There's something else. And that's what I think in the live industry is, I think we all realize that's what we miss, especially through COVID. Mm-hmm. I remember someone asked me, says, what do you think about live streaming events? My comment was, I'm not sure it was the one they were looking for, but my comment was a streamed live event is kind of like going to Disney World and finding out that Chuck E. Cheese is filling in that week. I mean, It's a show, it's a mouse. It's not the mouse you're wanting. It's just, all the parts are there, but it's just not the same. And I think that's really kind of what live streaming is. I mean, obviously we're seeing that the fan base, the fan confidence of wanting to go to a show is there by far. Everyone's ready to go see some live entertainment. Right. And that's just what we could not get through streaming events.
I love the analogy to Chuck E. Cheese and Disney, but so let's dive into kind of some of the strategies, because you and I initially met because we've spoken on a couple of stages at the same time at a couple of events, and I have to say that every time you spoke, you always drop the bombs. I was always very impressed. Where I'm like, man, he's a quiet guy, and then you speak, and it's like, holy cow! The room is silent because you just gave some of the most amazing advice. And when it comes to because people who are listening to this, they're at various stages of their career. When it comes to building your career, and when it came to building, and even now, kind of even post-COVID, and kind of starting over and getting things ramping up again. What are some of the key strategies that you've seen people implement that have allowed them to really just take off, while at the same time some of the bad ones that you've seen other people implement that they just drop off? Because as you know, and we've been in the industry long enough, there are people who come in all the time and then they just disappear, and there's a reason for that. But I would love to know your perspective of what are the success strategies and what are the failure strategies that a lot of people implement, thinking that it's going to allow them to succeed, but it ultimately gets them out of the industry in a very short amount of time.
I think the biggest one is you have to be flexible. Flexibility in your career, especially starting out. When you're starting out, you're trying to network with people. You're trying to meet other people to do what you do and trying to get on different shows that they do. So for me, I never really had it was weird when I started. I don't think I really had a plan. I never wrote down a plan. My plan was, I'm going to do this. and that was the plan.
Yeah.
I didn't have a plan B. It's just whatever it took to do this, I'm going to do this. So I remember one time I took a job and someone said, "Hey, we don't have any lighting positions left, but can you just do curtains for us? There's a lot of curtains and hang curtains and deal with them for this corporate show." I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I went and did curtains for a show. I think people get caught up a lot in, whatever job I choose, well, that's going to identify me. And I don't think that's, especially in the live entertainment, our shows are just, a tour is maybe a few months long anymore these days. A corporate event is just a one-time show. So I can go do drapes, and I'm not going to be considered the drape guy. I did a show one time, and they needed someone to assist the florist. So I was the floral assistant on the show, and it's fine. It's so much easier to network in the live industry when you're inside the arena than when you're outside the arena. And what I mean by that is anywhere you can get inside the gig is the best place to network. Now it may be even musicians. I can't think of how many musicians I know who still have great jobs and they still play on Broadway from time to time. And it's because of networking. It's just, it's a great place to be. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing bad or negative, I think, by, taking a job at maybe a step down from what the job you just did. I think it's really bad for someone to say, well, I'm just a guitarist. And I remember in the Thomas Rhett band, I mean, the keyboard player and guitarist he said, natively I'm a bass player, but this was the job that was offered. So I did because I could do it. And he's still has a great career. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think everyone just gets too locked into what's happening right now is what's going to define you.
Yeah. I think a big key to that is putting the pride aside. I obviously, a lot of my career has been as a guitar player, but my very first tour was actually in 2009. It was actually with a band that was my favorite band growing up, but I was the guitar tech. And I'm not a guitar tech. I don't know the first thing about guitar teching. I mean, I can fix my guitars and tune them and, and make them sound good. But I'm not a guitar tech. And I remember I even told the guitar player when he asked me, I told him, I'm not a guitar tech. But this was also the guy who I was, I started playing guitar because of him back in the late 80s. But yeah, and there was that element of going, I'm not a guitar tech, but this is such a cool opportunity. Who gets this kind of an opportunity? At that point, I was playing guitar on movies and TV shows, by the way. In 2009, I was playing guitar on a lot of different TV shows. But yeah, I took about, a month and a half, 2 months out of my life to go be a guitar tech on a tour because that was going to be a fun experience. And I actually ended up meeting Michelle Petnato, who Yeah. She was actually a guest in season 1, by the way, of this podcast, but she's also a Full Sail Hall of Famer. And she's worked with, so many huge artists as a front of house sound mixer. And just like us, went to the same school, got the exact same degree, but had a, completely different, trajectory in her career. But gosh, I think, it is important to put pride aside. As I was sharing with you earlier, I have a great friend, I have a friend of mine. I can't say great friend. I have a friend of mine who unbelievably naturally gifted musician. I'm very envious of his natural abilities as a guitar player, as a singer, as a songwriter, just very, very skilled, good looking as well. And basically all the elements to have a great career. If he just got out of his own way and allowed himself to write music for other people, play for other people, produce other people, but because he was so focused on only doing his thing, and that door never really opened for him, he's no longer working in music anymore. And it's a shame when the reality is that his talent could have allowed him to have a tremendous career, and it really was just pride, unfortunately.
So I'm just curious, and not to interview you during your interview, but so when you were the guitar tech, is there anything that you learned from that made you a better or think differently as a guitar player?
Yeah, I learned a lot from that because prior to that, as a guitar player, I had only either done studio work or like lower level gigs. So I'd never done a major tour. This was a major tour. This is actually their a reunion tour, and they're like the Beatles of Japan. So it was crazy. I got to experience a lot of things. I remember, sitting on the train, the bullet train, and, there are cameras, just a couple, feet from my face. And the real guitar player was sitting next to me. And I turned to him, I said, Paul, you want to switch seats? He goes, oh no, you can deal with that for a little bit. And I remember the biggest thing that I took home from that was I like the fact that I can go to the grocery store and no one bothers me. I like the fact that I can do anything throughout my day and no one bothers me. And having experienced what their life was like overseas, like literally people in the hotel, coming back from a gig, people at the hotel, just the lobby was mobbed. Going to the train station the next day, there were fans who knew what trains we would be on, and they were all there. Flying into another city, there would be people at the airport. I mean, it was crazy. And I remember thinking, I don't like this. I mean, I was nobody, but just as a part of the experience, I didn't like it, and it was really one of those things where I thought, I'm glad I got to experience this without having to experience it really firsthand. That was my biggest takeaway. It really hit me how fortunate I was to be able to do a lot of work behind the scenes, but do the work that I really loved without having to be the face like I was seeing them. And I was, experiencing, slightly from an outside perspective, but seeing what they were going through. And it completely made sense to me why a lot of artists have a hard time with fame at that level.
Yeah. It's my dad. The reason I asked that question, because I've done that a lot. I always try to think, what can I learn from whatever experience I've taken, even if it's not in my career, but maybe it was just a job. And, my dad told me, he says, you should always try to learn something from someone all the time. And I always thought, man, that's interesting. I always try to learn something from someone. And I had a roommate one time. He was horrible. And I just kept thinking to myself, what would I learn from this guy? I kept thinking of those words my dad was saying. And what I really learned was, I didn't want to be that guy. And I remember how he was, how he treated me. I was like, I don't want to treat people like that. So, I mean, I think you're always, I try to not chalk anything up to a really bad experience. I think we can always learn something from it. But I think that's what helps you grow as a musician or anything in your career. Multiple experiences just help you a more well-rounded person, which I think is what really kind of helps achieve you along.
Well, I agree. And I don't think that success is a linear path.
No, not at all.
It's kind of like getting in the car and driving, what you said earlier resonated with me, because when I got out of school, I didn't know the path to get where I wanted to go. I just knew where I wanted to go. Right. So I think that because I knew where I wanted to go, like you, we were much more malleable along the way to do other things. I mean, I started off as an assistant engineer. That was the last thing I wanted to do. And I did that for a couple of years. I learned a lot about mixing. I got some great mixing skills. I worked with great people. I was very fortunate about that. But the first opportunity I had to get out of that and transition over into, full-time guitar. And while I was playing guitar, I ended up transitioning into production, where I was actually producing a lot of demos and playing for different people at that time. That was more along my path. But again, that wasn't the final way to get there where I wanted to go. And then I moved out to LA. Next thing, I'm playing guitar on a bunch of TV shows. I never expected that. But being malleable allowed those opportunities to present themselves. And then it was through that I got my first song on a TV show. And that opened up a whole new world, So being able to move, and turn, it's just like driving a car to the, to the submarine shop, right? Where you want to go get a sub sandwich. If you drive straight, eventually you're going to hit a tree or you're going to hit a house. You most likely have to turn along the way. And success in the entertainment industry is very much the same.
Someone told me that when the first Apollo mission that was going to the moon, they were exactly on course 2% of the time.
Wow. 2%.
They were were always having to, at some point, make a course adjustment to get back on the path of where they had to go.
Wow. 98% of the time making adjustments.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's the way with all of us. And, when you're talking about when we both left school, and people that are starting out in this, in the music industry and trying to figure out to be a musician, you don't know. You don't have the knowledge to know how to get to where you want to be. So there's no way you can make a plan and that plan's going to work. Mm-hmm. So just give up the thought that you already know how to get there, because you don't. It's just you have to kind of discover it a bit by bit.
Yeah, I have people say to me fairly often, like, "Oh, you're so lucky to do what you do," or whatever. And my answer to them is, I just stayed in the game. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. When you stay in the game long enough, exactly, it's basically what you said about getting into the arena. When you're in the game, it's a lot easier for opportunities to present themselves, but you have to stay in the game, and you have to put yourself in the position to be able to be in the game as often as you can be.
Yeah. I heard someone explain it easily. He said, as far as being in the entertainment business and succeeding, you must be present to win. And that was it. You got to show up. You got to be there.
Hey, I just want to jump in here for a second and let you know that if any of your goals over the next year include recording and releasing a new album, generating placements of your songs on TV shows and films, or just building a fan base that will sustain your music career, I want to invite you to my special workshop, Real Musicians Don't Starve. Now, in this workshop, we're going to focus on the 3 keys that are essential to your success, and you're going to walk away with an extremely powerful strategy that allows you to create your own wow factor. And this gives you the power to attract musical opportunities to you instead of constantly struggling and chasing after them. Now, you can check out this workshop for free at realmusiciansdon'tstarve.com/workshop. And once again, that's realmusiciansdon'tstarve.com/workshop. Now, back to the podcast.
You were just talking about, learning and constantly learning, what your dad was asking you. Of course, when we were coming up, we had to go to a physical school. Online learning didn't exist. I don't even think I had an email address when I left New York and went to Full Sail. But now, as you've pivoted, obviously every time you pivot, there's new education that has to happen. How do you approach that now in your own life? How do you approach learning new things on a consistent basis?
I think we're forced to. If you want to stay in the game, you got to constantly be learning. Even during the pandemic, I went back to school and finished and got a bachelor's degree. I had associates, had an opportunity to come up, so I went and got a bachelor's degree. Just constantly keep learning. I mean, sometimes we have the luxury of sitting down and maybe with a nice drink in the evening and read some manuals or read something. And then sometimes I've had where your equipment breaks. I had a video switcher break on me at rehearsals, and they said, "Great, we don't have any more of those. You'll have to go to a Sony." So I was reading a manual and had a Sony in front of me the next night, was doing a show. So sometimes it's forced learning. Someone's learning by the seat of your pants. And sometimes you do have the opportunity and option to learn slowly. But I think you need to be suited and be able to learn in both scenarios. Yeah. I can tell you, as older, I was much better of a student when I went back to school this past year than when I was 23 and went to school. I think I just learned how to, success and being perfect all the time, or trying to be as perfect as we can be, has just kind of been instilled to me, and being in the business a lot longer than when I first came out of school. If I got a 98, I would be like, man, what I miss? I wanted to know exactly what I got wrong. So I think as we evolve and we become, I think as we become better learners, that helps us become more successful, if you will.
I agree. We also have a lot more at stake too.
Yeah, it's a process to be a student. It is. It's a process to be a teacher as well. And I think, honestly, what's really helped me is I have a heart of teaching. I love teaching people, and I'll teach anybody any bit of information I know, because I feel like I don't own any of it. I learned it from someone else. So I think teaching others also helps me understand how to be a better student, listener, whichever word you like to place in there, for sure.
So you actually got your bachelor's? You went from an associate's to a bachelor's during the pandemic.
Yeah,
that's a heavy course load.
I got a bachelor's degree in show productions from Full Sail.
Yeah. That's a lot to do in a year, but that's a perfect example of taking the time and utilizing it, to your advantage, and ultimately capitalizing it. And it kind of goes back to, what we said at the very beginning of, pivoting and finding opportunities. And I think that the pandemic was a great example of it was a way to either have life work against you or have life work for you. And I've talked to people who've allowed both to happen. There's some people I know where the pandemic was the worst thing in the world. And there's a particular individual guitar player for a pretty well-known band who you know as well, who I saw him post on Facebook last year. He said, "Is anyone as bored as I am?" And I remember reading that post and I thought, how can you be bored right now? There's so much to be doing. There's so much to be learning. But that was their approach. And then there are people like you who took that time and just filled it with, they utilize that time and to their advantage, and filled it with knowledge so that they can, set themselves up for success when things do get back to normal. And I love that perspective.
Yeah, I don't want another pandemic to happen. I learned a lot of great things, and I was able to do a lot of things during the pandemic that I would not have been able to do if I was touring on the road all the time. Mm-hmm. And I get that and understand it. But I don't want another pandemic to happen. By no means, I'm not advertising that at all.
Right.
But I think we just have to create, we create our own moments, and we have to create our own atmosphere. Yeah. So, we take advantage of what's lying around us.
Right. So I have a question. I always love to ask this. If you could go back in time and go back to when you were 21 or 22, before you went to school, or before you graduated, I should say, and you could sit down and have a conversation with yourself, what are two pieces of advice that you would give your 20-year-old self right now?
Well, I'm going to back up and go to about my 12-year-old self.
Okay.
I don't play any instruments. I wanted to play electric guitar because that's what the girls liked. And I told my mom I wanted to play electric guitar. She says, well, if you learn piano first, then you can play anything. And I was like, well, that's dumb. Girls don't like guys that play piano. So I said, well, I'm not going to learn anything. And she says, okay, that's fine. It's up to you. So I wish I'd gone back to my 12-year-old self and said, hey, man, just go ahead and pick up the piano and everything else will come along. Because I do wish now, I wish I took up an instrument, and I've thought of still trying to pick it up at some point. I think I would like to learn a little bit of music. Secondly, as far as on a career side, I love my career and I love how it's turned out. It's a really, really hard question. I don't know what I would change. But I just don't have any idea, because I really love everything I've done. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't want to change any of that, because I think it's where it's left me. And even all the struggles and even all the pain it's gone through. And I think so. My wife and I, we've been married 22 years. So if you want a relationship in the industry, you can definitely have that. I'm living proof of it. But her and I were talking about that. Even all the struggles we've had, just being gone all the time. I just don't know what I would change, because it's all worked out really well for us, and it's molded me into what I am.
Yeah, there is, I don't know anyone who's had a long-term career in this industry that said it was easy.
No.
But at the same point, I think, especially as we get older and look back on it, I agree with you 100%. There are things where, like, there were struggles. I would give myself some pieces of advice on, like, what to avoid. Like, hey, this is going to be coming up. Avoid it, right? But looking back, I look back and I think, man, even during those hard, rough times, I look back on them now and they make me smile. I'm happy I went through them, because I'm happy I had that experience, even though I wouldn't want to go through that experience again.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've been on shows where, especially, working some of these large award shows. I mean, there's a lot of hours in there. It's physically painstaking on you at times. Mm-hmm. But at the end of it, I mean, the end product is like, I was part of that. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it's not easy what we do. And, the old saying, if it's easy, everyone would be doing it. But, I look at some aspects of my job. Well, I think it's pretty easy, mm-hmm. to video direct a show. That's pretty easy. You playing guitar, I'm sure there's parts of it you think is really easy that other people don't. But there was times it wasn't easy. I remember our guitar tech with Blake. He always said there's a spot in playing guitar that it becomes hard. He says that's usually where people drop off. Mm-hmm. He says that's where you can tell the difference. Like, playing some chords is pretty easy, and there comes a part where it gets hard, and that's where everyone starts flaking off of getting into it.
Yeah, that's when you get past that, that's when you start developing your own voice on the instrument, and you can improvise, and and you can find yourself in different situations and be comfortable. And I think there's definitely that middle. There's a hole, and getting up to that's a bit of work. But when you get to that, that's when you have to decide: are you going to really learn how to speak the language and make it your own? And if you do, then you go through a whole big process to get over that maybe fill in that hole. And I think a lot of people, they just kind of come up to it and they just kind of, hang out along the surface of it. And then, those are the people that, you can tell it when you hear them play, they don't have a specific voice or sound that's unique to them.
Yeah.
But finally, real quick, I really don't think you're going to trump what you said earlier about being inside the arena, because I think I agree with that 100%. I think that is, probably the best piece of advice that anyone can have. It's always easier to have opportunities when you're inside the arena than when you're on the outside. But for anyone starting new, let's say there's a 17-year-old listening to this and they're just wrapping up high school. They're moving on to that next phase of life. What would you advise them if they wanted to be in the entertainment industry in somehow? Let's say they played guitar, but they just wanted to be in the entertainment industry in some aspect. Maybe not necessarily as a guitar player, whatever, songwriter, whatever. What would your advice be to them about the next step to take in their journey?
Well, I think you have to put yourself in the environment for success. And so what I mean by that is you have to be able to make some moves. One, I think if you want to play in country music, you should probably come to Nashville for a little bit. It's going to be really hard to be in Salina, Kansas, and be in the Nashville scene. So I think a lot of people get like, well, I don't want to leave my hometown. It's like, well, I think you have to do that at first, and then you can move back wherever, and you can kind of regain that life you want. I see that with people also on the technical side too. Nashville for a tech is notorious of, the weekend warrior schedule. So they want people who live out of Nashville instead of flying them in every week. So I have a friend of mine who did that. He moved to Nashville. He was here for a year and a half, and then he moved back to Florida. He came here, he got established, found some connections, and got to the point where he didn't have to be based out of Nashville anymore. So one, I think you have to place yourself in the environment for success. Obviously, if you're wanting to go fishing, the desert's not the place to be. So obviously we want to put yourself in that environment. And two, like we talked about, you gotta be flexible. You have to read the things that's happening around you. Be cognitive of what's going on around you. Don't put the blinders on while looking, for the one thing and realize, well, just a couple steps over, there's another guy who just asked about, can somebody do this? Because I don't know about on the musician side, but man, on the tech side, I've had, for example, I have filled out 3 applications my entire career. Because it's all word of mouth. It's all about, hey, are you available? I'm looking for one of these. Hey, I'm not, but a friend of mine is. Okay, call them up. There's so many of that going on that it's very quick in reaction. Because I think you have to just be ready for that quick notice. The least definitely starting out for sure. Yeah. It's interesting when we were doing the awards show for the CMT Awards. We'd all had 12, 14 months off for the pandemic, and it was down to the last minute, and we're still trying to figure out certain venues and things of that nature, because no matter how much time we have to plan, there's always something that you have to kind of overcome, some kind of obstacles. So even though we had all the time in the world to plan ahead, you're still just trying to figure it out at the end sometimes. Right.
The title of the podcast is Real Musicians Don't Starve. And, you've said it a number of times, like you don't play an instrument. And I know a lot of engineers who also, they don't play an instrument. They might be able to, strum a chord or two on a guitar, play a couple chords on a piano, but they're not really players. But I still view them very much as musicians. They're working with music. They're treating the console like an instrument, and it's very much the same thing. With video, with lighting, everything that goes into the actual experience of the show. When you're running the light board, you're playing that light board as an instrument. Basically, that's what it is. It's an instrument. It's not playing notes. It's lights, but it is an instrument. And same thing with video, and all of that plays together to create the overall experience. You can't put on a great show and have that great experience without great sound, without great lights. All the technicians who are a part of that world are essential to that show running smoothly and the walking away from that experience satisfied. That you got your money's worth and even inspired. How many times do you leave a concert like you were with the Bryan Adams concert, inspired to go, this is amazing, right? That was a life-changing moment for you, but yet there were a lot of other people behind the scenes that made that happen. And I think it's important to keep in mind as a listener, it's not just about writing songs. It's not just about, playing notes and chords on an instrument. There are so many other opportunities in the entertainment industry to make a living. And even if your goal is to write songs and to play an instrument, it doesn't mean that you can't work as a technician in some capacity, to get those doors open. Like I said, I worked as an engineer. I have mixing credits on albums as a mixer. That's the last thing that I am, but my name does show up as mixed by on a bunch of records, because that was the opportunity that presented itself at that time for me to stay in the game and keep moving forward. And exactly what you're saying about getting into the arena. It's a lot easier to meet people inside that arena and have opportunities present themselves when you're inside the arena versus when you're on the outside. Yeah, that's important to keep in mind, no matter where you're at, what stage you're at in your career. And one other thing that you said that I loved was you didn't realize how many opportunities were available to you. And that's another thing that I'm always trying to present, that there's a lot of opportunity when we look for it. There's a lot of opportunity, but we also have to be able to or be willing to step off that straight path that we've laid out for us and be able to walk off to the right or to the left a little bit. Sometimes you have to walk off to the left or to the right in order to move forward.
Yeah. I think just the spontaneity. I'm a huge fan of songwriters, and I will completely just fanboy out anytime I get to listen to songwriters and how the process happens and how they feed off each other. I love that because that spontaneity is what's credited to so much creativity. Even having a hard plan going in, and just what a small warm up riff turned into the iconic riff of a song, or how what someone said leaving out from the writing session turned into something on the next writing session. And I just love that. And I think I think the biggest thing to realize is it's going to be extremely hard and difficult if you think you can navigate and be successful on your own. And because we feed off so much of each other. And I think we become stronger by that as well.
Yeah.
When you talked about, sometimes people just don't want to, well, I'm this in the industry and that's all I am. But even though you have abilities to do something else, you can make something else so much stronger.
Yeah.
Interesting thing about, I'm a guy from West Virginia, so I still love agriculture and I love gardening and everything else. But an interesting thing about oxen, when oxen put on oxen can pull so much individually, but when two oxen put on a yoke, they can actually pull more together than they can individually combined.
Oh, really?
So they're actually stronger when they work together. So I always think it's a very interesting concept.
Yeah.
We can always be stronger when we're working together.
Yeah. This is success in the music industry is by all means, it is a team sport. This is not one of those things where you're going to make it on your own 100%. There's no way I would be where I'm at without having had the mentors that I had, not only early in my career, but, throughout my career. And then of course the connections that you make and it is a team sport. There's no two ways about it.
And knowing that, and also if I can't do it on my own, I got to do it with others. And who do I want to be with? That's, associate, find the group of people that make you want to be stronger, that challenge you.
Yeah.
I think that's a key part as well to the success.
I love it. Great. I knew you would, there's like 3 unbelievable words of wisdom that you've shared today. And every time I've heard you speak, I'm always like, man, he just always, lays it down. And I love the analogy also of Chuck E. Cheese and Disney. But I always like to end each episode with our manifesto. And that is that real musicians are business owners and our business is music. A business is simply an organization where value is provided in order to make a profit. And unlike starving musicians who operate with a mindset of scarcity and fear, as success-driven musicians, we operate with a mindset of abundance, confidence, and service. We are doers, we are dreamers, we are creators, and we are achievers. And we know that our true value is determined by how many people we serve and how well we serve them. Because our truth is, real musicians don't starve.
Yeah, that's great. Service. That was my favorite word, service.
Yeah, it is a service. And that's everything that we do. Everything that we do in life is a service if you want to generate income from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one thing I wish I learned when I was in my teens and my early 20s. I didn't learn that until later in life, but I wish I learned it earlier. But that's definitely, no matter where you're at in your career, if you're 17 years old and you're playing your first show tomorrow with your band, you're a service to the people who are coming to see you play.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, Brian, I appreciate you telling your story and dropping a lot of big nuggets of wisdom with us. And I just want to thank you for coming and joining us.
Thanks, man. I love it. This is great. And all the success. Hope to you.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. We'll see you guys later.